வாசலை போல் அனைத்துலகும் இன்பமுற எத்தையும் புகழ் மணக்க இருந்த பெரும் தமிழனங்கே தமிழனங்கே உன் சீரிழமை திறம் வியந்து செயல் மறந்து வாழ்த்துதுமே வாழ்த்துதுமே வாழ்த்துதுமே.
Now, I would like to call upon Professor Viswanathan, the stalwart pillar of CG Tech Forum, to address the gathering.
Respected Dean, College of Engineering, Professor Suganti Ma'am, the chief guest of today's K-Talk, our pride of India, the world chess champion, Mr. Viswanathan Anand, affectionately called as Vicky. So it is indeed a very great moment for all of us to be here to listen to the great personality, one of our India's pride, and on behalf of the CEG Tech Forum and on behalf of the team of Kurukshetra K-Talk, extend a very warm welcome to the great chess master and the grandmaster and world champion. So his accomplishment is incredible, and he has brought lot of laurels and glory to our mother India and to the younger generation in particular. So we are really happy, sir, and thanks for accepting our students' invitation and to be here and motivating our students. Thank you very much for that. So I extend a very warm welcome to our Dean, Professor L. Suganti Ma'am. So we all know that we are gearing up for MBA activities, but in spite of her busy schedule, to support the students' activities and to honor the guest, so she has come all the way. Thank you, ma'am. And so it is our pleasure to have you here. And I wholeheartedly welcome the faculty members, the participants from other colleges and our own students to have a very great moment now. So as I think I would like to share a few things about him. I think I am few years elder to him, I believe, by age. And so during my teenage, whenever I see his name in the newspaper, because he started becoming popular in his teenage itself. So whenever I see his name in the newspaper, I used to correlate my name with him, and I also have Nathan and he also has Nathan. So that is a nostalgia I recall, and I think that is the kind of influence he has made with all of us. And so he is very down to earth person, and he is going to talk about the connectivity between chess and the current technology. So as a professor in information technology, I was just going through what way I can connect the chess with my subject. I frequently teach artificial intelligence, and the chess programming is one of the very predominant example that we try to teach the students, and we try to we expect the students to come out with the programming for a chess game, all that. So to be precise, we can correlate chess with many of the computer related subjects, starting from data structures, because how efficiently you organize the data and how efficiently you develop an algorithm to play a game, and what kind of heuristic search you can have, and what kind of movements you should make. And now with the advent of this big data analytics, so how the concurrent programming can help in doing this in a very effective way. So that way, I think there is a very strong connectivity between programming and the chess game. So that way, we will be really grateful to him, and he is going to share his experience, and he is going to motivate you with his speech. So with that, I once again wholeheartedly welcome him on behalf of the CEG Tech Forum, and hope you will all enjoy his day. And for your information, yesterday there was a book launch in IIT Madras, and today there is an article in Hindu related to that. If time permits, please go through that. And one of the professor from management studies, I think he has released that book. It was released by IITM director, and it talks a lot about this memory and cognitive, all that. So please look into that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Our beloved Dean, Dr. L. Sugandhi, has always been instrumental in all our activities. On behalf of CDF, we consider ourselves fortunate to receive her constant support throughout the course of planning and organizing the event. Now, I take this impeccable moment to cordially invite Dr. L. Sugandhi to deliver the presidential address.
Good morning, honored guest of the day, Mr. Viswanathan Anand, the Grandmaster and 5 times World Chess Champion. On behalf of College of Engineering, we are thrilled to welcome you, sir, because as Professor Swaminathan sir was mentioning, we have heard about him when we were young only through papers. Today you have your internet, you have your email, you have your mobile. But for us, he was an icon. He was in his teens when he set marks, when he set roads which no one had traversed. I think those are the things the younger generation has to look up to. He set marks, he set laurels, he brought pride to India in paths which was untraversed. And we were very proud to hear the name, and we used to think the credit goes to his parents for bringing him up in that manner. But today, looking back, I think it is not only his parents, but it was Viswanathan Anand himself who took it up in the right spirit and knew what was important for himself and for the society. And today, we are proud to receive him as the guest of honor for our Guru Kshetra talks. Sir, Dr. Swaminathan sir was talking about artificial intelligence, cognitive science. As a management professor, I only look at chess as a strategy. Thinking ahead of 10 moves, thinking ahead of 5 moves, how will my opponent play? And accordingly plan my strategies. So, just by comparison, Swaminathan sir was talking about computers and programming, heuristic programming, which tries to do this game. But way back, 30 years back, his brain worked as a computer, and he worked with that cognitive intelligence, with that heuristic intelligence, with which he was able to win his strategy was all in his brain. And with all that, we find him as a very down-to-earth person, very practical person. If you listen to his YouTube lectures, we'll know it's someone next door. He's our neighbor who's talking. So that is his spirit, that is his style. And I think that is one important character style that has brought him so many laurels, which made him very approachable to everyone. Today, he having accepted to talk to our student community is also an indication of who he is. I think he has not lost his sheen, because we find people from all generations sitting here to listen to your lectures, sir. And I think that is what you have won over the years. And I find many students who were walking across here knew that you are coming and they want to take snaps of you, and they were standing on the walk paths to have a glimpse of you, sir. So we are very proud, very honored. I don't want to stand between you and the students. On behalf of College of Engineering, we welcome you, sir, and we thank you for accepting our invitation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your valuable words, ma'am. Now I request the Dean to honor the chief guest with a memento. chess master, is a 5-time world chess champion. Mr. Anand learned to play chess from his mother and kick-started his journey when he was just 6 years old. At the age of 14, he won the Indian National Sub-Junior Championship. At age 15, he became the youngest Indian to earn the international master title, followed by 3 consecutive national championships. Ever since Mr. Anand was a child, he was known for his swift playing methods, which earned him the name the Lightning Kid. Mr. Anand was the first recipient of the Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna Award, India's highest sporting honour. Apart from this, he was awarded the prestigious Padma Shri Award at the age of 18. Mr. Anand is the first sports person to receive India's second highest civilian award, the Padma Vibhushan. We are very much excited to have such an eminent personality with us here today. Without any further ado, I would like to request Mr. Viswanathan Anand to deliver his prudent speech to the eager forum.
Dr. Sugandhi, Dr. Swaminathan, friends, thank you all for that very warm welcome and your kind words. I grew up at a time where actually computers were non-existent in the world of chess. In fact, I became a grandmaster before I had seen a computer. And when I was growing up, learning meant picking up a chess book, looking at a few hundred games that were printed, and just trying to see what could I do differently, what can I learn from these games. If the subject matter was explained, so much the better. You read the explanations and that gave you some insight. If not, you had to look at the moves and try to pick up stuff. Then in 1987, the first chess computer, or I should put it this way, the first chess program appeared for the computer, for the PC. And this was not even a chess playing program. It was simply a database. So for the first time I had to deal with this abrupt change. Instead of carrying 20 or 30 small booklets with all the games that I wanted to use in my tournament, I now had to just carry one computer, and we're talking maybe 5,000 games at most. But what changed was the indexing. I could search for this opponent, all the games he's played with the black pieces in this particular code. So there are like roughly if you take, there are 500 codes. Any one code I can pick and say only in that code show me the games. That has lost or won some specific result, played in a certain time period. So it made search and retrieval fast, but nothing more than that. But that itself shook the world order, because those who were used to working with books, who had even built up indexing and library skills with old material, suddenly found people seemed to be getting an unfair advantage. People like me, just young people who had not mastered some old method, and the same information we're getting much faster. So that was a kind of first stage, and even then some of the older players struggled to adapt, which is a very important warning, if you like, of dangers of not adapting, because what we see more and more often in life is that change comes faster and faster. First of all, there's what you're doing it slightly differently sort of change. The second thing is what you're doing may not even be popular anymore. People may move on to something else, and then you're left preserving some old art. Or it could be a different way of presenting the whole problem. So each one of these things happened in a way in chess. First, chess playing programs came about 3 or 4 years later. And at that point, they were pretty much a joke. in the sense that I could play 8 or 9 chess playing programs at the same time and win easily, because my intuition was just so much faster than anything they could come up with. But they had an annoying habit of finding small mistakes that would creep in. See, when you execute your stuff, a mistake creeps in here, an inaccuracy there, and computers never miss because they never make sweeping judgments on anything. They do it rigorously, one move after the other. They check every single move possible, and they work. So initially we used computers the way we use a calculator to help us avoid elementary mistakes. Not because we can't do it, but because it's time consuming to do it every single time, repetitive work. Anyway, slowly computers started to get stronger and stronger. Now it's important to explain something about the nature of chess, which is that chess is, and we see this much more clearly now than we did before, it is not a game of strategy. Strategy is what human beings do to the game of chess. Because we don't like doing boring, repetitive work, we take in conceptual judgments or intuition, we impose that on the game. But the game itself is not strategical. It is perfectly tactical. And that is why chess was conquered very early by computers. So what happens is once a very famous friend in the world of computers and operating systems, he told me that he wrote a program which could play 2 games at the same time. One game of chess and one game of Go. And the idea was against its rival. And the idea was, at every move the computer could choose, did it want to make a chess move or did it want to make a move on the Go board? And in the end, the combined result is what you're looking for. If it's 1-1, it doesn't help, but is there a strategy which helps you choose which one? And he said almost all the time, the computer finished the 2 programs just finished the chess game first, got it out of the way, and then started playing Go. Because in Go, it is almost never critical. You can come back one move later and the thing isn't hopeless. Whereas in chess, if a move is made, you have to respond to it immediately. If I can get 2 consecutive moves, I could probably beat even a modern AI computer. The gap is so big. So chess is very much about tactics and execution. And it's immediate, it's urgent. You cannot put it off. So that was the big difference between chess and Go, for instance. And that is why Go took so much longer to be solved, for a computer to beat the world's best human, because it is a much bigger board. Strategy actually starts to play a role there. One feature is that something which happens on one sector of the Go board doesn't immediately have consequences everywhere else, whereas it seems the chessboard is just on fire. One move over there changes everything all across the board. So that's why the computer could never neglect it. Anyway, but chess is also vulnerable to this thing because it's so tactical. Old style computers, and it's funny to refer to that, but I'm talking of computers from 20 years ago. Old style chess playing programs essentially could beat the best humans. All they had to do was simply double in speed every 18 months, you know the rule, and they were beating any chess player. And still, that kind of chess playing program was about as much stronger as the best human is to a club player. So the gap is roughly the same. And one interesting thing that happened was that unexpectedly we thought these, I don't know what's the word, we used to call them brute force, we'll use that one term, brute force programs. It's like this new term we have called over-the-board chess. We never realized that there is something called over-the-board chess because we thought it's the only way you can play chess. But when you start to play online, then you need new terminology. So, brute force programs had already shown that chess was out of the human grasp. It was too complicated for us, and that itself was very difficult to master. And so none of us were prepared for what was going to come next, which was the world of artificial intelligence. And here, essentially, it's the method it solves problems. Neither is accessible to the human mind in a certain way, but we can look at its conclusions and work backwards. Essentially, what AI did was, and it happened in both. It happened in chess. It happened in Go, which is that they gave this neural net a bunch of rules, and they told it to play with itself. It just played, kept on optimizing, fine-tuning its strategy, did that millions of times in a day, and one day it was simply strong enough. And the relevant bit for us is two things. So as I said, brute force computers already pose this problem of what is the competitive advantage that one person brings. Once upon a time when I was growing up, like I said, it was clear. Whatever I thought about the game was unique, was my unique skill. Someone else would think slightly differently, and that was the clash. Already brute force showed that you can learn a lot from computers. Learning this disciplined adherence to tactical play, to tactical details, never letting the details slip, makes you a better chess player. And you can keep on learning. Sometimes surprising conclusions come, but you keep working and go. But what AI has done is simply, because it started afresh, it did not take any human knowledge into consideration. So all the stuff that you will learn and I will learn when we start playing the game, put your pieces in the center, do that, doesn't exist for it. It figured all that out by itself simply by playing lots. And it cannot say something with certainty. It simply estimates everything as a probability. So this is 50%, this is 52%, and so on. And then it chooses the optimal strategy. And that produces amazing results. The best AI playing chess program was able to wipe out every previous generation of computers, of chess playing programs. And so matter was closed. Unexpectedly, it turned out that our intuition had been pretty good after all. It took AI to show us that, because brute force computers were doing it differently. We didn't appreciate it. But a lot of our guesses about the balance between initiative versus material, mobility, space, all these concepts in chess, a lot of our human guesses were very good. We didn't have the ability to justify it, but it was there. So, from our perspective, the most relevant things are accepting that we are biased, whether we like it or not. The way we go about the world, we work with some stereotypes, some shortcuts to figure out the world, and that applies in chess to whichever field you are. And it can be slightly wrong, it can be very wrong. And I might give the impression that I ask profound questions to the computer and then it spits out some very profound answer, and I understand that. It isn't like that. Most of the time, I ask mundane questions, it gives me mundane answers. I can see that not everything fits right, but there is no obvious pattern. My questions go around the place, it gives a lot of answers. But suddenly one day I'll wake up and realize that two answers were connected and I can see the connection. And then you grow a little bit and it goes. As they say in advertising, half the work is wasted, but you never know which half. It's like that with chess, or I suspect any walk of life. You will ask a lot of questions, half will be wasted. But the second thing is, the only thing that differentiates us from someone else when you have access to very powerful tools is what are the questions you ask. To put it another way, if two of us are athletes and we are running, the difference is significant. But if both of us are going to get into a car, there is no difference in that anymore. Then the question is, can you think what is the best route? Can you think about what terrain your vehicle will perform best in? All that kind of question becomes more relevant. It's the same thing in chess. You keep posing questions over and over. The answers will be the same for everyone, but if you have asked a question that nobody else thought of, you have something that no one else has. And that makes the difference. You don't have to give up everything you believe, but you should be open to keep on expanding that belief. And a modern generation which did not grow up with the idea, which for them an ancient game is already a game played in the computer era. For them it's not something from 70 years ago, it's something from 20 years ago, 25 years ago. For them it's much easier to shed these biases because they never even had them, and they're much more willing to experiment and take the game to its limits. By this I mean that every direction in chess which we were taught not to follow because it was too difficult, they can see that as long as it's borderline viable, you can keep probing it. As for AI, how we all adapt to it, I mean, I feel like I'm preaching to the converted, but anyway, how we adapt to it is going to be critical in the time coming forward. It's going to challenge a lot of jobs, it's going to make a lot of stuff redundant, we know that. But at the same time, it's a brilliant teacher because it gives you very, very accurate answers. And it's something to which you don't have to, you can shed all your embarrassment and ask the most embarrassing and basic and stupid questions. And it will give you the answer patiently. That's a very valuable thing because one of the things I find nicest about learning with computers is that you can make any move, and even if it's a blunder, you don't feel embarrassed. You make a note and you move on and you go to the next problem. So it is literally a question of how we will work to develop the concepts. Finally, chess as it's played today will probably not be recognizable to anyone who stopped playing 40 years ago. If they haven't been following the game, it's fundamentally unrecognizable. You look at it and think, how can people do everything that we were taught not to do? And how can you go on like this? But as someone who has kept up with developments, while I find this strange, it's not alien. So if you keep abreast of developments, and by the way, this should be valid not only for whichever domain you are, but in many other things, because it's more and more some domain that you never thought of impacts your own. So that's roughly where we find ourselves in chess right now. And that's pretty much when I started out, like I mentioned, I became a grandmaster before I ever seen a computer. And then recently, about 4 years back, I became World Rapid Champion. And that was already after an AI program had beaten the best brute force playing program. So you feel that your career is coming through a lot of experiences, but that would be, for me, the key takeaway. Probing and asking questions, harder and harder, more and more complicated questions, that's where the growth is for us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We were very inspired by your knowledgeable and motivating speech. Now, it's time for a quick question and answer session with the Grandmaster. Students are now encouraged to come forward with their questions.
Good morning, sir. My name is Ria. So you have participated in numerous championships. Is there an incident that is very interesting or that you hold close to your heart that you would like to share with us?
There are probably many. Any particular type of incident you're looking for? A sporting incident?
Sir, anything, it's up to you. We just want to know something that you hold close to your heart or you would like to share. Even if it's many, it's fine. We are here to hear.
One characteristic that I can share is that all my life I have found it inconvenient to play certain people because I just don't like them. And when they sit down in front of you itself, it irritates you and not in a way you can control. So, and this leads to some self-performance. So you actually miss some opportunities and so on. One of the things that is then helpful to do is you go back, you acknowledge that as a problem. You tell yourself the next time I'm going to look at this player, I'm going to remind myself what happened the last time I was irritated. and hopefully they'll think. So these kinds of impulses are the hardest to fight. Because it sounds trivial, and you, in fact, you don't go around mentioning because you don't want to necessarily tell somebody you don't like this person and so on, but you have to be honest with yourself. More broadly, you have to remember what happens to you in the moments before you succeed or the moments before you fail, and try to isolate what happens inside your head before things go wrong. There's always two stages. First, there's a little bit of euphoria thing, and you think it's just an emotion, has nothing to do with some technical detail, but you often find that it's a warning sign.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir. I'm Arnachalam. My question is, how important is it to manage stress and pressure while you're playing the World Championships?
I think you deal with stress and pressure all the time in every single game, but in a World Championship, because the stakes and because also there's a build-up of it, you know that you're going to play a World Championship match in 6 months. Deep down, you know that there's something very, very big coming, but you also know it's not going to happen tomorrow, that you have time. So you're in this strange world between inside you are getting tense, even if you don't acknowledge it or feel it, but it's building up slowly, and but there's nothing immediate happening. And there is nothing to show what will go wrong till it starts, by then it is too late. So it is important, I think, to acknowledge that something very important and significant is going to happen, and compensate for it. You have to take time away from whatever you're doing. You have to meet with friends. You have to do all the things that you naturally do in a day to release some of that pressure. And like I said, also thinking about what are the things that happen to you under stress. Even noting it gives you a little advance warning, and that's what you're looking for. If you can identify it, then it works.
Thank you, sir.
So, hello sir, I'm Anand. And sir, you have been a great inspiration to everyone who have played in the world of chess, sir. But what kind of advice would you give to the beginners who really want to get into this world?
I would say the same thing that I did. I mean, I started playing chess. I had no idea where it would go and what it would lead to. And that's probably the healthiest. Start small, play for fun, see if you enjoy it, and just play often. And it will take you places, but as long as you're aspiring for something which is within reach, I mean, in chess, they say you should never play in a tournament where you have no chance of winning, because that's hopeless. But you should never play a tournament where you have no chance of losing, because then you can relax too much. So always this fine line between being able to succeed, but the danger of failing. I think that's where you develop the best. Thank you, sir.
Hello sir, this is Shanmita. After winning your first World Championship, you became the inspiration of many chess aspirants. And when you go for the next championship, you represent the country. That means you have a lot of expectations from all over the country, and you also have a title on your name. And how will you manage all these stuffs?
I think the second time, that is the second match that World Championship match I played, so let's say as a defending champion, I had just come off a very disastrous stretch. So I was suffering from a lack of confidence. And I had the feeling that things were going to go wrong. I felt, I'm not in my best state, and ironically that was helpful to take off a lot of pressure. So even though I faltered in the end, I only faltered in the final stage, in the semi-final, not earlier. So, but in a future event, it took me a while to understand that even if you block, before a tournament I always had this discipline of not reading anything, not a thing. I try to get into the, because you can't carry someone else's pressure. It's bad enough you have to carry your own. But in a sense, the brain is very thin, because you'll you'll think there must be people who are rooting for me, and therefore you impose this pressure on yourself. It's very hard. In fact, you spend a lot of time trying to deal with it. After the third or fourth time, it became much easier because I had the feeling there is no more pressure on me. From now on, everything is a bonus, and it actually started to feel much easier then. So you almost feel like you're ready.
Sir, and in chess games, in many positions you will have disadvantages. From there, you have in many games you have won the game. In that point, what will you think?
So when you're playing badly, when your position is bad, then you first have to try to get, even a bad position, you will have some chances of success. You'll have to decide what is the path where you can make it as difficult for your opponent as possible. For that, you will need to understand your opponent well. What are the positions where your opponent does badly? How can you steer into that? And you should get into a kind of destructive mode. Your object is to spoil the normal course of the game somehow. Find something that breaks that chain and cope. Or you sit and defend, whichever strategy you feel is appropriate.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. I'm Sriniketan. My question pertains not just to the game of chess, but to the game of life. How do you bounce back from a loss? How do you train your mind to cope up with the loss?
I think you have to acknowledge your disappointment, because if you just pretend it didn't happen, like I said, inside you're not cooperating. So it will still affect you. You have to acknowledge what happened. If you take a day off or two to get over that. But we get over everything, right? So you push it past. And then you have to think, you need some discipline. It's easy to keep being upset with yourself, despite what you might have done, but you have to tell yourself, I do not have the right to spoil the next game because of the one that already went. And if I lose the next game, I'll feel twice as bad. So, store it like that. And then it depends on how much break you have. If you have a long break, you can distract yourself, preferably get away from what you're doing and come back to it later. Because it's important that you feel some hunger again to do what you're doing, and that's very hard in a normal situation. Humility, learning from what went wrong, and trying to do it better next time. Those are also normal steps. And I think, like I mentioned, if you have interesting hobbies, interesting friends and so on, then they allow you to change the subject once in a while, and that's very useful when you're trying to forget some disappointment.
Thank you.
Hi sir, I'm Megha, an information technology student. My question is there any difference in the way you play against a human and a supercomputer? Is there any difference in your tactics, and how much do you think that difference matters when you play against a supercomputer?
There's a big difference between playing with a human and a supercomputer, because I play with a human and I don't play with a supercomputer. I haven't played a game with a computer in a very long time. Simply because it is so hopeless, then it gets depressing. If any one of you has bought a phone within the last 6 years, that was rhetorical, then it can beat any human being on earth, and that's not going to change for a long time. But the interesting thing is but still, I do spar against a supercomputer for very brief, 3-4 moves, not longer, just to test my understanding of something. And there, it's simply, can I learn how to do a very small sequence, and can I execute it well at a high level, despite the fact that the opponent is resisting at a superhuman level. And that's maybe the only test I put myself to. Otherwise, at some point it becomes hopeless. You cannot motivate yourself as an athlete by running against a car, because you'll never understand. The gulf is so big anyway that you don't even know if you've done a good job or not, and I think that's the big problem.
Thank you, sir.
Hello sir, I'm Ashwin, and my question for you is, what is that one life lesson you learned the hard way? So one life lesson which you feel that if you had learned it earlier on in your career, in your life, would have had a bigger impact?
Uh, Actually, I think the one life lesson I learned is that there are many life lessons. It's very hard to narrow things down. And this I believe intuitively as well. It's very hard to, because there's so many variables in life, it's very hard to pin something down and say, this is the one thing that went wrong. I mean, usually it's a whole chain of things that goes wrong. Equally, I believe now that probably this is as good as things get. You cannot do one thing differently. That's not how life is made. In fact, I think many of the good things I did is because I had some painful defeat and I learned from that and in that sequence. The reason also I gave this answer is that very often your weakness and your strength are not very separate. They're often the same thing applied in different situations. And that's why it's very hard to separate one from the other.
Hello sir, delighted to speak with you. What I usually do is, actually this is about my...
Sorry. Could you speak a bit louder?
Actually this is not a question to you, it is a suggestion to improve my game. What I usually used to do is move pieces with a defensive strategy. At times I have seen success and at times I lose too. Is there anything I can do to take success at all times?
So you mentioned that you will find that you keep repeating the same strategy, you play in a similar way. That's very natural. All of us, after a while, we tend to, just like an AI thing, we tend to repeat what works and push back what doesn't. The only difference for us is that we are able to learn. And so every once in a while, and make it the smallest possible step, but force yourself to do something slightly differently. That's how learning happens and that's how you get stronger. Force yourself to do something that you do badly and therefore you avoid. Try to do it at least once or twice and see, maybe you'll get better at it or at least you'll see it more clearly. And I think that's maybe the best suggestion I can make.
Thank you, sir.
Hello. So good afternoon, Vishnu sir, and thanks for such an informative and interactive session. And well, it's apparent that we are witnessing a boom in the field of chess, whether it be the amount of grandmasters that India has or the number of people who seek to learn and play chess. And I have a strong penchant for the magnificent game of chess. So I have a few questions, especially in the principles that are involved in this game. When you consider the openings, is it necessary for you to study openings because you have a plethora of variations when you consider Sicilian defense, like you have Alpin, Ashdod, or other variations? So should we study the openings and play the game, or we can just understand how the pieces move and then proceed?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. It used to be thought that you should understand the ideas behind openings rather than memorize variations, because the ideas then can be applied even if there are small variations, small differences. So imagine that you have a sequence of moves. If you understand the idea behind them, then even if two interpolations are made, your conceptual understanding will still hold. Whereas if you know only that sequence, then you're already a bit lost. The problem is in chess, and this is never going to change, it's the nature of the game, there are also long sequences where the moves are so hard to to understand simply that you have to memorize them. So we memorize what we cannot intuit. And I think even in memorization, you get better at it. After memorizing something 10, 20 times, you'll actually see a pattern that makes sense and then you've reached a higher level of understanding. So it's very nice to say don't memorize, and every coach will tell you don't memorize. It's only partially possible. That's why if you don't want to memorize openings, then the only alternative is just to play a lot. You play once, twice, 100 times, and even if you can't memorize something, you'll find some alternative which requires less of that kind of strategy, that kind of precise move, and you can shift to that.
Sir, I just have another one. Do you get better at chess by playing bullet or blitz, or you feel that rapid or classical is more important?
I try not to be dogmatic here. I personally prefer rapid. And by the way, once upon a time, rapid was considered like bullet. to a generation that required 3 hours for a game, playing a game in 25 minutes seemed like, what are they doing? So there's always some shock value when people take something to the next level. Then we got to Blitz. And Blitz, by the way, is 5 minutes per game, and Bullet is 1 minute per game. So at every stage, there's somebody trying to do things in Blitz. I don't see any value in it. But I'm not able to say that it is useless for someone else. The brains
a final question, like there's a myth or I hear from everywhere that they say that when people start very young age, they tend to become, the chances of becoming a GM is more. Like, is it true, or you can start at 18?
You can start at any age, but I think the thing is, these days, if you don't become a grandmaster at the age of 14, then chances are you won't become world champion. That sounds very cruel, but chess, like every sport, has become quite young.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
This concludes our Q&A session. On behalf of the entire team of Kurukshetra 22, I take this opportunity to share my immense pleasure to express my sense of gratitude to everyone present here. I would like to thank our team, our chief coordinator and other staff coordinators who have supported us throughout. I especially thank Mr. Viswanathan Anand for honoring this occasion despite his busy schedule. Last but not the least, I thank the enthusiastic audience for keeping the talk live. I request everyone to stand up for the national anthem. I request everyone to please remain seated. This is a reminder for the mega event happening today. KA Awards is a yearly tradition where we award unseen heroes with our prestigious honor. I would like to invite all the vibrant student gathering to be with us today at 4 p.m. to witness the best innovations of the year. An eminent panel of charismatic leaders including IPS and IAS officers along with the founders of Geodis will be joining us. Last but not the least, we have an exciting performance to entertain you all along the way. I hope you all had an amazing time. Thank you. This is Hema signing off. We will be dispersing shortly. Please remain seated. We will be dispersing from the last row, so just remain seated everyone. Thank you.